I'd like to introduce Casey Cox. Casey has been using K-Motion technology for the past 3 years, was originally a PGA professional up in New England, has since left to do biomechanics at his company Sports Science Solutions.
Thank you everybody for joining us today. What I really hope everybody can take from this is just really an example of how I went from a very common everyday PGA professional and was able to build a business around this technology. I really have found this to be an integral part of everything I do now. We're working with athletes across multiple sports now using this technology. Today obviously we're going to focus on the golf aspect of things, but if you have any questions as we go, please feel free to ask. Love to be this pretty interactive, and hopefully you guys can take just a little example of how I've utilized the technology and why that's worked for me. Just a little background, my first love was hockey. I am a hockey player through and through, started at 5 years old, grew up in New England, transferred, I was a goalie by age of 7, and then played all the way right up through college. That was definitely my first love, and a lot of the things that I learned from a coaching aspect came from the people that I was exposed to in the hockey world. So I owe a lot of debt of gratitude to that community, and a lot of the things that I do today are a result in paying back what I received from the coaches that I grew up around. You know, hockey did teach me that coaching aspect and inspire that within me, so that's really the foundation of where I come from. When I was 13 years old, I was so obsessed with hockey at the time that my mother looked at me and she said, "You need something other than hockey in your life." She bought me a membership to the local country club. She started dropping me off on her way to work in the morning and picking me up on her way home, and that was her way to get me introduced to something other than hockey. A week and a half after I started that process, the cart kid didn't show up on a day of a tournament, and that was my first day on the job in a golf operation. So that's how I got introduced to the industry. 12 years later, I left that golf course as a PGA professional and went on to start my career that way. When I went to college, at that time, I had really figured out that coaching was what I wanted to do when I was done playing hockey. I had, at that point, determined that golf was the direction I wanted to go, and so everything was geared in that direction. I decided at that point that the deficiency that I had personally was related to communication, and I decided that because of all the exposure I had to my coaches growing up. Their ability to take something so complicated and make it so simple for me was a magical gift. I saw that as the secret to coaching. So communication became everything that I felt that I needed to study in order to become a good coach, and that's really what I focused on. As I left college and started to build a career as a golf professional, you know, I was heavy into the operations of things, as most of us are, and slowly over time started to gravitate away from operations and get more and more into the teaching aspect of things. In 2015, I got my first job as a head professional in Southern Florida. I moved down here, went to a beautiful private club in the southern part of the state, and you know, started my career. Was managing the operation, teaching 30 hours a week, and really enjoying myself. And at that time, I had become, I would say, obsessed with physics and really what was going on at Impact. Loved the launch monitor technology and looking at those sorts of things, manipulating impact, fitting clubs. All of that became really, really interesting to me. And it all started me down this road of cause and effect, where I was trying to define what was going on and figure out why. What I figured out was that as much information as you might learn from launch monitor technology, that doesn't always tell the story of why things are occurring. And that's really how I started to find biomechanics. Went to my first TPI seminar in 2016, got certified, and while I was at the seminar, K-Motion was there. That was when I introduced to the K-Vest. I left that seminar and called my father for the first time in my life and asked him for something significant other than the normal everyday things. I said, I need a K-Vest. So my father bought me a K-Vest, and everything has kind of flourished from there for me. When I got the K-Vest, it was kind of like a great, I have this now, oh no, what do I do? So that's when I really started to think about the process. How do you use this technology to connect with people? Going back to my roots in college, how do I use this tool as a communication, you know, to really connect with my students? A lot of the complicated things that may make sense in my mind are completely a foreign language to them. So how do we connect that gap? And that's really what my focus came. And what I found with my first, I stepped out on the range with my first lesson. It was a 77-year-old man who'd been playing golf for more than 50 years. He was a 30 handicap, terrible balance, all your normal stuff for a bad golfer that's been playing for a long time. And in one session, we were able to change things in his golf swing that he had tried to do for 50 years. And to me, it was an amazing moment where I had that epiphany that, oh my God, this technology has the ability to define cause and effect, and not just for me, but in a communication tool to the student as well. And that to me changed everything. That had just completely flipped my world upside down. So as we start to go through things here, this is all part of the process that I've learned since that, and things that I've tried to institute to help build a business, to the point where eventually 2 years after having a K-Vest, I quit my job as a golf professional, moved back home to Maine to start my own sports science consulting firm. So without further ado, to me, coaching cause and effect gets down to a discussion of contemporary versus traditional, right? And I think this is where things can get a little bit heated between some people, right? There's a long line of information that we have about teaching golf instruction. A lot of it's right, some of it's confused, but a lot of it is focused for me around this idea that golf is still a soft science. Okay, if the medical community is still a soft science, we certainly are still a soft science in the golf community. And the more that we learn from technology, the more that we move ourselves towards being a hard science, and that we understand the cause and effect and why things occur. So to me, using technology isn't about proving somebody wrong. It's not about taking the past and saying they weren't doing it correctly. It's refining a system and starting to understand a way for us to communicate more effectively with our students. And again, I think that's the key ingredient to everything in terms of coaching. We use technology to better understand the cause effect, right? We want to identify starting points. This is key. As we start to go through the case studies, we'll start to illuminate how you're using the current evaluation tool to identify very quickly an area to start working on with a player and something to focus on. Again, communicate effectively. The ability to measure and track progress with your students. So many times you have students come to you and they're trying something, or you've changed something in their swing and it feels different. To be able to pull something up and say, I know it feels a little different right now, but look at the progress you've made. And you can track that progress over time, and it really brings validity to what you're doing, and really helps put your students' minds at ease as they're starting to go through this learning process. And finally, for all of us, right, we're teaching for a living, I would assume, so we're trying to build a business, right? How do we take this and put it together in a process that's going to allow us to really build something that's going to be effective long term, both for ourselves financially, but also for the students who are going through this. This is one of my first reports, so very interesting, right? So we go through this long transition with K-Motion, from K-Vest to K-Motion, K-Coach, right? We have all these different progressions. For me, when I first got it, right, you were reading graphs, you were reading 3D imaging. There was no, right, the reporting was very simple at that time. So I had created my own reports. Now, coincidentally, some of the reports that I had created in the past now mirror some of what the evaluation tool does. And I think that's the amazing thing about the new evaluation tool, is that you no longer have to be a biomechanist or completely obsessed with what's going on, on that level. You can be a general golf professional and really get into this stuff and use it effectively with students. I think that's a big step forward that we've seen in the technology very recently. Again, how reporting's changed. It used to be graphs and animated playback features. So you're looking at numbers. Went to multi-swing report, which was an incredible tool to start looking at the averages. And now we have the evaluation tool, which just takes all this and gives us an ability to communicate it in a way that is much simpler than it's ever been. Just to go through a quick lesson procedure, right? When I have somebody come in, my number one goal with every single student is to assess them at the highest possible level. Okay, so when a student comes to see me, I don't care what we're trying to learn, I want to know everything I can possibly know about this athlete, right? So my institute does everything from mental evaluations, nutritional evaluations, we look at body scans, and then finally the big piece, right, is how does this player actually put all of these pieces into motion? And that's the 3D motion capture, and that's what we're talking about here. So when you're looking at that, the ability to assess a player at the highest possible level, for you as a coach, should eliminate all questions in terms of what should I do with this player, what's going on. And that's really what this technology is giving us the ability to do. And then, more importantly, right, take this message after we have all this information and communicate it in as simple a way as possible. Right? So you're really working from two ends of the spectrum, in my opinion, where you want to assess at a high level, but you need to be able to communicate that information at a very, fundamental and relatable level for whoever you're working with. My order of operations when I have a lesson client come in always starts with an interview, right? We're talking about sports they've played. I want to understand physical limitations. I'm going to take them through a physical screen. We're going to go through all of that, again, to draw this nice picture of what's going on with the student. Then we're going to evaluate the client, right? Have them hit the balls. We take them now right through the evaluation. It used to be take some captures, look at multi-swing reports, or look at animations. Now it's the report. So it's easier than ever. We have them come in, they hit 5, 6 irons, 5 drivers, boom, we're off and running. They have a report that we're working off of now. Okay? Then we review the report and we formulate the plan, right? And this is where I bring my students along in this message, right? I always talk, as soon as the report pops up, I very jokingly say how much you want to know, because you can take it really deep, right? If you've gone through the report, you can take it all the way to the depths of measuring averages of numbers and where you are in time and space. Most of that's not really going to be applicable for most of your students. So what we're going to look at today is some of the more simple ways that you can communicate with a student and not have to get into those depths and still make it a very good and positive experience. From that, after the plan is in place and everybody's comfortable, what we're going to do then is create a movement pattern, right? So we're going to create the movement program. We're going to go into the biofeedback aspect of the program, and we're going to start to train these players based on what the assessment told us. And finally, we got to explain why the movement program is going to help. And I tell the story of rep thresholds. This to me is a foundational piece of what I teach and what I tell people, and the reason why people come back and continue to take lessons. Everybody, we talk about muscle memory, building muscle memory. Muscle memory is actually neurons and pathways that exist in our brains. Okay, so when your brain is trying to learn a new movement, okay, it takes about 120 repetitions for your brain to flip the switch and say, okay, this is something that's going to happen repeatedly. We need to create a motor program. So what's going to happen is they're going to create a pathway. A neural pathway gets formed from the frontal lobe to the cerebellum. Okay, and when that pathway gets formed after that initial rep threshold, that player is now no longer going to describe things as being funny or feeling abnormal. Right? The body is actually physically becoming accustomed to working through this program. This is also the reason why if you have a student come in who changes something, may leave, right, and it feels a little funny, right? We don't quite feel right with it because they haven't reached a point literally in their brain where the body is able to continuously do and go through this process without having to think about it cognitively, okay? Now, the rep threshold is an important thing because if you're trying to bring somebody to 120 repetitions, okay, let's say we're changing the posture at the top of the swing, right? Well, that can feel different because swinging from here and swinging from here are very different things. So if we're actually trying to change the biomechanics of what's going on, we can expect that A, they're going to feel different, but B, we have to have a plan to bring them across that threshold where it's not going to be different anymore. Okay, and that's the story I tell with my students. I know this is going to be different, and we'll see this in some of the case studies, right? Some of the elements that you'll see in the evaluation may get worse, right? But from an order of operations standpoint, we're trying to fix very particular things in this evaluation. And the rep threshold is an important thing for your students to understand because they need to understand that A, it's not going to happen in a half an hour, right? And B, the reason why they want to come back to you is if I asked you to go out and change anything in particular, okay, I give you a lesson, you go out, how many reps is it going to take for you on a driving range to reach that rep threshold, understanding that you're trying to do something different and do it new, right? That's very difficult without having a feedback system. So the ability to use K-Motion's feedback system, a student wants to come to me because it's more efficient. By the end of our assessment and then that first lesson that I have with them, I've reached that rep threshold with them. So their body's moving in a different way, which means we've made improvements, but it's also starting to become much more customary and the body isn't feeling so abnormal while doing it. You're able to build efficiency into the training process. And if there's anything that you can sell in today's world, it's efficiency, right? Your students don't necessarily want to go hit balls an hour a day for a week to learn what you're trying to teach them. And it isn't necessary. If you can provide them with the proper feedback, you can get them to make improvements in a much more efficient manner. And that's a big part of what I sell in terms of the story. Every lesson finishes with an evaluation. Start with an evaluation, end with an evaluation. It's the simplest thing in the world to do now and to show the progress. So without further ado, we'll get into our first case study. This case study says getting back lost yardage. It should say finding my swing again. This was a 68-year-old woman who came to see me a couple of months ago. Very typical, right? The student that walks into your office and says, I'm losing distance, I'm losing the ability to hit it straight. I used to be a 10 handicap, now I'm a 15, what's going on? Why is it going in the wrong direction? So this is telling that story there. Her number one goal was to get back her consistency and then her distance, right? She's like, I got to hit it straight again, but I want to hit it far. I'm only hitting my 7-iron 100 yards now. It used to be 130. So we've all heard that story before. Her notes, right? She's experiencing random misses. That drives her crazy. So that's the first thing that we need to start to fix. Her handicap is the highest it's been in 15 years last season. So in the evaluation, she was quad loaded, which led to a loss of balance. We saw a loss of posture, reverse spine, and ultimately she wasn't able to get off of her right side because of all these different ailments. But very interesting concept. Can I have you come up for a second? So when we get somebody into a setup position, and we'll see this as we start to look at some of the report numbers, right? If you go ahead and get set up, shift your weight all the way towards the balls of your feet. All right, when we go into a downswing, when you actually apply the centrifugal force of the downswing, it's like somebody taking you in the back here and pushing you forward, okay? The body is not built to create balance off of the balls of the feet, okay? For our extreme athletes, okay, Tiger Woods did it for his whole career, so I'm not saying it's not possible, obviously. But for a 67, 68-year-old woman who's experiencing an extreme loss of balance in her swing, her getting set up in the balls of her feet as soon as she swings is synonymous to me taking this and pushing her in the back. Okay? She has no balance from there. I don't need to push him very hard to put him off balance. If he sinks back towards his ankle joints though, right, what's going to happen is he's physically on different receptors in his feet. And we don't need to get too far down the anatomy of this, but basically what happens is if he loads pressure over his ankle joints instead of the balls of his feet, he's going to engage the glutes and the hamstrings, okay, which are larger muscles in the legs that are going to help anchor the body and provide a solid base for the upper body to disassociate and rotate. If he's in the balls of his feet, he doesn't physically have the musculature engaged to create that dynamic balance. Some players, again, will. Your more athletic players, your younger players, people that are strong, can create more dynamic balance and not lose the posture in the upper body by loading and creating power through the balls of the feet. That's actually a very good way to create power. In this case for her, it was not. Okay, and we'll see that going forward. Thank you. I don't need to keep you up here. So a lot of the things that we look at, right, and so for years she's been taking lessons. They've been talking about, well, you're losing posture, right? Keep your shoulders down, okay? She's not getting to her left side. She does a million drills trying to get to her left side. Well, the fact is, until we change the fact that she's quad loaded, she's never going to be able to do these things. This gets back to cause and effect for me. She's been beating her head against a wall for the last 3 years trying to get her game back, and it literally starts with the fact that she's just set up in the balls of your feet. And this is dangerous because if you're working with athletes, getting set up in the balls of the feet is probably the most natural thing these people will do. Okay, because most of our other athleticisms happen and are transferred through the ball of the foot. That's because that's creating vertical motion. So running, jumping, lunging, all of these active motions happen through engagement of your quads and your calves. Well, in this case, that's not what we're trying to do in the golf swing. Okay, we're not trying to lunge or jump or move. We're trying to create stability in the lower body. Okay, so that's how this is going to play itself out, and you'll see that cause and effect start to go. Again, we formulated a plan. We started talking about primary tilt, which is really the forward bend dynamic of the pelvis. We worked on weight distribution in her feet to help her feel what it was like to actually load properly and stay balanced through a golf swing. And from there, we were able to have a conversation about sequencing, right? The one thing that she hadn't been doing is getting to her lead side and having a good sequence in the downswing. Well, there's all of your loss of distance and direction, is that her body, her trunk, is physically in a state of trying to recover from a loss of balance. It was doing what Jason was doing, right? It was getting pushed in the back, and what happens? Your body's natural reaction is, I'm going to stand this up and push your pelvis underneath you. So we see early extension and loss of posture. Well, those things, again, are occurring because of the loss of balance. It's probably the most common thing that I see in students. So the ability to communicate this is very important. As we get into that, again, we're going to go into the movement programs. And as we get into the movement programs, what we'll do is we'll go through a process. We're going to look at deviations. Okay, deviations are a very important part. Yeah?
Are you using any kind of pressure mechanism to also?
Absolutely.
Are you using K-vest?
Yep. So we can look at we can look at posture using K-vest. I use body track to measure ground force. But it's all synonymous, right? You're going to see them on body track load and move through the balls of the feet predominantly. And at the same time, you're going to watch your K-vest. You're going to see huge deviations in forward bend, either through the torso or pelvis. And oftentimes, you're going to see a loss of bend or side bend throughout the golf swing. So yes, I do use other implementations to help do this as well. So finally, we go through a report comparison. At the end of a lesson, I'm able to pull up reports and actually tell a student, hey, this is what it's been looking like. So this is the pre-lesson driver evaluation. Okay, so getting into this a little bit, one of the things you see, no speed, okay? Consistency's down though, okay? So both of the things we were talking about, right? She wants her speed and her consistency back. Well, we're gonna focus on consistency first. One thing you see is a lot of S posture and a lot of reverse spine. Okay, my back hurts just looking at that. So what you're also gonna start to notice over here, look at the forward bend mechanics of her upper body. Okay, you see how these other deviations are all very low, okay, but the forward bend of her body is deviating very high throughout the swing. And this is where we can start to look at these deviations, and these are going to give us pinpoints of where to start, okay? In this case, I can see that as she's swinging the golf club, right, her upper body is all over the place. Now, as a result, what you're going to see when somebody's in a perpetual state of loss of balance is that their body's going to resist rotation. Okay? If your body is losing balance in one plane, it's not going to allow you to start moving into another plane. Okay? Your body's calibration and proprioception to balance is one of the most powerful autonomous systems we have, probably other than breathing. Okay? And that it's going to override other things that you're trying to accomplish. Okay? And so what we see when people get in a perpetual state of loss of balance, what do? Right? They stand up, they stop rotating, arms complete the swing. Because the brain is still trying to accomplish the task. No matter what you do, task is hit the golf ball. So brain is going to accomplish task, right? But the body is in a state of perpetual compensation. And for as long as the body's trying to compensate and keep you upright and keep you from falling on your face, okay, your body's going to resist rotation. So we're going to see high deviations in the forward bend mechanics and in rotation, all right? As we go to post-driver, or post-lesson eval, all right, we see her number jump from 71 to 80. Okay, so just by helping her find balance and posture, right, throughout the golf swing, we see the consistency numbers jump. And other than one bad swing at the beginning, we've eliminated reverse spine and S posture from her golf swing by doing so. Okay, what you'll also see is look at the forward bend numbers here, right? We go from 7.63 and 7.9 to 1.5, 1.7, 2.3. Right? I describe the body as a lazy mechanism. Okay, your body always tries to take the easy way out. And I'm not talking Sunday sitting on the couch, chips and dip lazy, right? We're talking in terms of creating movement, your body's not trying to create this complicated system where it's using all of these different mechanisms. It wants to get from A to B as efficiently as possible. However, when you put yourself in your own way, in this case, right, she has a lack of balance, her body's literally in its own way. Your body's not going to complete the swing by rotating and shifting pressure and doing all the things we want to see. In this case, it's going to be arms. So what you're also going to see here, right, as a result, is we have minor improvements to her rotation. Now as we go into the iron eval, real quick, let's talk about this. Speed creation. She's a 60 pre-lesson, she goes to 56. Now I know we upped the consistency, but do we know why the speed dropped? And this is actually pretty common.
Discomfort with the movement.
Yeah. The body's literally moving through a new pattern, right? We talked about that neural pattern. I've taken her out of this pattern that she's had forever. Okay, when your body builds those neuroreceptors and those patterns, as you go through the pattern, the body gets more and more comfortable with it. We can overload, we can train overspeed. All of a sudden, these patterns become quicker, right? Your body can move through it faster. Doesn't mean it's better. It just means at this particular time, when she goes through a new pattern, we achieved consistency. That was the main goal. But in a way, she's starting back at zero in terms of her body's ability to actually make this happen quickly. Okay? So that's something that you'll often see in these. Again, the ability to explain that to a student is very important, because I know him, but why am I swinging it slower? Well, you're actually hitting it 10 yards further too, swinging it slower. So there are ways to communicate that, but that is absolutely why you see that. Getting into our irons, right? Again, looking at consistency, same sort of thing, right? Reverse spine, S posture, a lot of deviation over here. Same idea, right? We jump from 79 to 81, speed drops a little bit, right? But we've lost a lot of the inefficiencies of the swing. And when we look at the deviations, this is huge, right? We go from these deviations to all of a sudden we've eliminated, and the only deviations we really see are now down at impact with the body. And again, I'm going to attribute those to the fact that she's literally moving through a new pattern right now. So I'm not going to expect the finished product at impact to be the same, because remember, this is a person who hasn't been shifting pressure into her lead side for 2 years now, right? She's swinging a golf club from here because her body's trying to balance. So now getting her to physically accomplish a new athletic motion, it's much more dynamic, right? And she's going to feel all of those changes. But again, that's why we're going to see a lot of that variation happen down towards impact. Getting into a junior case study, and the reason why, yeah, absolutely.
What was her response when she saw that score change?
And that's it, yeah, good question. So her response to the changes in the scores was really profound. She was very, very happy with it, but it oftentimes will shock a student, right? Because when they're doing it, it feels different. If you're doing a new motion and it feels different, it's not necessarily good, right? And a lot of people are like, it's funny, it feels funny. So she had a lot of that. I was getting a lot of that from her, was that this is a little funny, it feels uncomfortable. And then you pull up the report, you say, I know it feels uncomfortable, but look how much more consistent and efficient your body is, right? And that gives her something to hold on to and gives her a reason to start coming back. Because if someone's leaving you feeling uncomfortable, they're not always going to be inclined to come back. If they're committed, they're absolutely going to do it, right? But this is where the conversation of rep threshold, all right? This is why it feels uncomfortable. This is physically what's going on in your brain right now. This is why it's uncomfortable, okay? You can now take this out and try to do these improvements on your own. Maybe it takes you 4 to 6 weeks to get those reps in. I don't know what your practice schedule is, or how well you're going to take what we worked on and go translate it. And that's what we'll see some in this next one. We're going to get a little bit more into multi-lesson and how that goes. But yeah, absolutely. From that standpoint, I would say, the ability to put a student's mind at ease by showing them the reports, that's a huge benefit to having the reports, and something that I wasn't able to do previous. Even though I would go back through a lesson, take all this data down by myself after a lesson, it's not necessarily a good way to communicate it. So this evaluation really allows you to show progress, even in the most incremental ways, whether it be start of the lesson to end of the lesson, or as we'll see with this junior student over a little bit longer period of time. All right, so this is a 13-year-old player. I think he's like a 17 handicap, so he's a pretty good player. He really doesn't have any general understanding of the golf swing, though. Okay, so he really doesn't know what's going on at all. He can play the game, though. So his big goal was to really learn the fundamentals, right, and figure out what his road of progress is going to look like. So he's 13 years old. I describe him as generally weak. I think that's a very generous statement. This particular gentleman is built more like Gumby with no real muscle structure yet. And so we'll see it in his swing eval. His body tends to go all over the place, right? It lacks stability in a general form. He does not play other sports, although he is a competitive member of the New England Lego team, which they compete in robotics and things like that. So that tells you a little bit about where his head's at. So his evaluation, what we'll see, he's over-rotating significantly. Again, not a lot of stability. So, he's our typical student that's here and it's like, okay, go to the top of your backswing. And he's like, am I back far enough? So that's kind of where he's at. Again, over-rotating. He's quad-loaded just like our previous student was. So you're going to see some similar things there. Again, we formulated, evaluated, created his lesson plan. The movement program, focusing on primary tilt again. For him is rotation and side bend, right? Those are going to be the two major factors for him. His loss of posture at the top and over rotation, those are going to be the two pillars that we'll focus on with him going forward. And then again, from the report comparison. So the way this one breaks down is I have an initial assessment that I'll show you. And that was the first time I saw this kid. and then he came back. That second lesson is a pre-lesson and then a post. So you'll see how he translated from that first lesson into the second lesson, and then what it looked like as we finally got him sort of going down the right road here. As you can see, right, he's a consistent player. Again, 17 handicap. So what he's doing, he's consistently getting through the motion. But he's not able to do so with any amount of speed, right? Again, because the body is not in a position to create power or rotation. We see a lot of things. I highlighted S posture because it is an issue for him. It doesn't show up as much here, but it really is. Again, you can see spin, reverse spine, flat shoulders, all related, all coming from the fact that A, he's imbalanced, and B, he's completely over-rotating in the back of his swing. If we look at the deviation real quick, right, an amazing amount of deviation in his pelvis throughout the entire golf swing. This, again, speaking to that perpetual loss of balance. His body is constantly in a state of trying to find itself. So then we go to, so this is going from, right, initial assessment, we go to now lesson 2. So he comes back to me, this is the assessment at the beginning of lesson 2. So our speed creation was pretty good. He went from 54 to 68 in one lesson. His clubhead speed jumped significantly, okay? All again, S posture not so great, but what happened was he eliminated the over-rotation in the backswing. The one thing that he held on to from lesson 1 to lesson 2, and this is important, is that he limited the rotation in the backswing. Okay, so I can see what level of progress he's made on his own at home, playing around with things, interpreting things, by looking at the trend here. Okay, again, still major reverse spine and flat shoulders. We still have a lot of deviation going on here, although this forward bend is much better than it was. Okay. Now as we go to the post-drive evaluation, again, so this is at the end of lesson 2, okay, his numbers at the initial went from 54 and 78, now he's at 69 and 80, okay, so this is in 2 sessions. So again, some good progress here, better posture, still over, now he's back to over-rotating a little bit, okay, reverse spine, but you start to see the deviations are dropping significantly. Okay, he's gaining an ability to go through this new system, and what this is rep threshold. This is what it looks like when a player crosses rep threshold. Okay, for him it took 2 hours. Again, how long does it take on your own? If I asked you to go up to the driving range and feel a new spine angle, how many reps does it take? A lot. Why does a student come back and see me? Because I can build efficiency. I say by the end of the second lesson, I can guarantee you that I've taken you through rep threshold. Because we can use biofeedback, and I know the reps that you're getting are all going to be quality reps. That's very, very important. If we look at his iron assessment, you're going to see similar things. Pretty consistent, right? S posture, reverse spine, flat shoulders, a lot of deviation in the lower body still. He came back, it was actually pretty good. Really gains in both, right? Went to 73.80. Eliminated the flat shoulders with the irons. So again, making some progress here, not exactly where we want to see it. But you can see as we go into the post, now all of a sudden we're 74.81 with the irons, no longer the flat shoulders, still over-rotating and spinning. So you can see this player is going to struggle with this, right? You start to see the trend of, okay, he's picking up on certain things and we're making changes. There are other things that are going to be harder to get him out of. Okay, and these are going to become the pillars around which we build the program. When I go in to build 3D, the only thing that we work on now is the spin, right, and his angles of his body. So when he's doing, if we're doing speed work with super speed, or we're doing any type of work with him sequencing, I'm always giving him feedback on where his lower body is in the backswing. Because now instead of going to 80 degrees in the backswing, his body's limiting it to 35 or 40 degrees. So now we're unlocking a functionality that he's never seen before. Okay? But this is very important to be able to communicate with a student, particularly a 13-year-old, right? It's going to be hard to have the conversation and describe the physics and the biomechanics. It's easy to show him numbers and for him to start to interpret what all of this means and why things are occurring. Because that's going to help your students help themselves. At the end of the day, that's going to be a very important aspect as well. So, I want to talk a little bit about how I went about developing test groups. Okay? One of the things when I got my first K-Vest was, how am I going to put this into play, right? What are we going to do here? So I went to 2 or 3 of my regular students and explained to them, listen, I've got this new piece of technology. I have no idea what I'm doing with it, but I want to learn. Okay? Will you go through a process with me and continue to take lessons, commit with me for the next 3 months, take lessons with me, okay, and do so at the normal price. But this is the key. I scheduled rate increases with everybody. I said at the end of this 3 months, my rate's going from $125 to $175 for everybody. And I'm going to roll out this new program for all of my students. But between now and then, I want to work with you. I want to prove out what we can do, and I want to do a little bit of experimentation. Now, as part of my 2 or 3 regulars, I picked the cheapest guy or girl in the club. Okay? Everybody probably knows that person. The person that everybody swears, this person will never take lessons. This person is never going to spend money on clubs, all of that stuff. Well, here's what I've learned about people that are cheap. They'll spend money if they see the value, okay? My favorite thing to do is take the cheapest guy in the club, or girl, and put them in part of this test group. And the reason is when that person turns around at the end of the test period and buys your biggest package, everybody else in the club goes, wow. Did you hear that Mr. Lorimer is doing a 10-hour package or lesson instruction? I wonder why. It's a big aha, and in terms of marketing, intertwining in your network, having somebody like that as an advocate for you to then go write a testimonial can be one of the biggest things that you can build a business around. So communicating your goals, you know, when I was telling the story, you know, people love being part of your progress, right? When I went to my students, like, I really want to do this, I want to do this with you. They're like, oh yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love to do that. So it's a really great way to integrate and start to do something new and do so in a controlled environment. You know, that period of time, that 3 months for me with that test group was all about showing them an unbelievable product, right? I was going above and beyond, going onto the golf course and checking in on them, right? Always going up on the range and they're hitting balls. I was dedicated to trying to figure it out. And selfishly, that actually was more about me than it was about them. I wanted their testimonial, I wanted them to get better, but I needed to figure out what I was doing. And this was a really great way for me to start actually integrating this into my teaching. Because I know so many people that I've talked to that have units, have K-coaching systems, is like, well, how do I start? I'm already successful with what I do. I don't want to start in with students that I've been successful with and tear it all down and do all that stuff. So you got to pick the right people. You got to pick a test group, and if you're really going to make a change in your coaching philosophy, this is a great way to do that. Again, develop your skills and then build that testimonial group, right? Having your peers or having their peers, right, your students speak highly of you amongst themselves is going to go way further than anything you could ever say about yourself, right? That's something that is really, really valuable and something that I've leveraged highly in my business. Why does a client come to you, right? A, they enjoy your company, right? Are you a likable person? That's just kind of an everyday thing. But you know, they could also be invested in learning. You're going to have people that are coming to you that are just, I'm a learner. I want to learn. I'm an early adopter. This is what I do. But I guess my message is you need to provide the reason. People aren't just going to come to you, and people don't just take golf lessons to take golf lessons, right? That's why people hop around. In this case, tell a story, right? Have a reason. Right? I sell cause and effect. I explain cause and effect to every one of my students. So at the very least, when a student leaves me for the first time, they understand the scope of why things have occurred in their golf swing for 20 years. Right? Giving people that clarity, the mental clarity, oftentimes helps their progress of learning. When people are confused and people don't understand why this happens, why that happens, right, it's a very, very confusing factor. And I think that's where the traditional instruction falls short, is that it doesn't explain to students in a clear enough way why things are occurring, right? So I've taught through cause and effect, and I explain rep thresholds, and for me, that is the big ingredient behind what has brought me success in what I do. You know, I've told my story. I build programs around the progress, right? So, you know, my students, my first student, Mr. Lorimer, that was my 77-year-old guy that had struggled forever. 2 weeks after starting to learn with me, right? This is the cheapest guy in the club, by the way. Okay? Don't tell him. Right? 2 sessions in, he's hitting the ball 40 yards further than he's ever hit it in his life. He's only hitting it 220. It's not like he's hitting it 400 yards. But he just little changes, and all of a sudden he makes these gigantic leaps. Well, you have somebody like that that'll go out and write a testimonial for you. You shoot that out in your e-blast. Those are really, really powerful messages that you can tell students. And that's going to bring a lot of business your way more than anything else. So really leverage those stories and build some clientele through the testimonials. I mean, you can have short testimonials, you can have long testimonials. They're all effective, okay? I take those testimonials. This is a recent golf ad I ran, okay? It says, there's no better time to learn and develop than now. New software gives a clearer, more concise picture of your swing than ever. Achieve your goals with us this holiday. Okay, so I'm up in Maine. It was 4 degrees when I left. 3 feet of snow just fell. People shouldn't be playing golf, right? Wrong. What better time to learn and go through these rep thresholds than in the winter? When I get a student in the summertime, I go through 15-minute lesson segments. The reason why I do that is because it's incremental. Everything I do in terms of changing their movement pattern is incremental. Because if I go through and change them drastically, you saw what happens on the report, right? They might hit it a completely different way. And when they go out and try to play golf and they're in that in-between stage, things get really bad, right? You see this with students, that things completely derail because they're caught in the middle of this rep threshold. So for me, the winter time poses an opportunity for every one of these students to make uninterrupted progress. And I know for a fact when these people are done with the program at the end of the spring, their golf games are in a completely different place. It's very basic, right? It's a winter program. With this, we added more than 30 new clients in the first 3 weeks of having it out, okay? Now, I don't teach individual lessons. I do everything by a package, right? And then there's a reason for that. I believe in development. I believe development's a long-term process, and I can tell that story, right? I know that someone's not going to come in and, you know, it's very, very rare that somebody comes and sees me once and it's a simple message and all of a sudden they're off and running on their own. It's really pie in the sky type of stuff. It doesn't happen a lot. So you need to be prepared to tell that story, to build player development programs, right? I put everybody into a minimum of a 6-hour program, okay? Because I know for me as a coach, from what I've seen over the past 3 years, that's really the minimum time base that I want to be really confident that when this person leaves, not only have they made little changes, they've made some really drastic changes. And that's what I want out of my students. I want committed students who buy into learning and buy into the process. But you really got to give them a reason. People don't just like, okay, I want to come to you. How many people have walked in and be like, yep, I want 10 hours of lessons right now? It doesn't, right? People don't just do that. It's very, very rare. You got to give them that reason to do it. And in this case, you know, I've said with me founding the Sports Science Solutions Academy now, I do a lot more other than just golf. And very coincidentally, as I've said, I've tried to almost quit being a golf instructor at this point to start my academy. But the more K-Motion rolls out these updates, the easier it is for me to send out emails like this and market myself. And then all of a sudden I've got 30 new students, right? So it's really, you know, leveraging the technology to build a process and build your own story is a way that you can really be effective with this. And like I said, I don't think you need to be a biomechanist. You don't need to be an advanced analytics person to now be effective with this, right? When I got the system, I would argue that you almost had to be. You needed to understand this on some level to be able to go in and read graphs or go in and look at 3D animations and pull out numbers. You don't have to anymore. These reports are making it so easy. You know, I'm able to train my staff to do things that 2 years ago, my staff, I really couldn't do with them, right? So you talk about training staff, you talk about all those things. It's made easier than it's ever been before. You know, my financial implications, the first year I had a K-Vest, I doubled my business in lessons. Okay, so that investment that my father made in me was one of the best investments anybody's ever made in me. You know, it paid off almost immediately. So if it's an investment issue that you're going through, the ability to build these programs could take your lesson revenue to places you never dreamed. Year 2, right, grew another 50%. Now this was the point at which I was sitting there as a golf professional in Southern Florida, and I did what any logical person would do. I quit my job. And so it was at that point that I said, there's really something here. I saw an incredible value in this tool and the ability, again, to communicate with a player. Take something so advanced and make it so simple, right? And that ability to me was worth its weight more than gold. I mean, this was an incredible thing for me. It was the epiphany. And so that was the point at which I decided I'm not a golf professional anymore, okay? I can't chase around carts anymore. I'm not gonna manage staff anymore. It's not because I don't love the industry. It's because I have this other thing that I found. And for me, coaching human motion is the most amazing gift. When you can show somebody, you could show a 67-year-old woman how to hit it further than she's ever had in her life, it's an amazing thing. And so that's really why I transitioned into doing the things I do. I moved back to Maine, founded the Sports Science Solutions, and that's where we've gone from there. We do this process every day. We do this with all sorts of athletes. We do it with baseball players and hockey players. We do it with golfers. We do it with a lot of different people because it's an incredible process. If you could take somebody and coach them at a really advanced level, and they find it to be a much more simple process than they ever have. I think it's an incredible message to tell your students, because so many people that I talk to about this that come to me the first time, it's like, it's really advanced science and it's got all these sensors and stuff. Being able to explain to somebody that the more advanced the assessment is for you, and that's for me as a coach, the assessment features are for me, okay, allows me to communicate on a much more simple level. And that's the amazing thing that every single student that I have leaves with is, that was an amazingly simple message. Like, I get it, it's so clear, it makes so much sense. That's the biggest gift you could ever give a student, is the clarity of understanding what's going on and how they're going to go about fixing it. They leave with this confidence of, wow, I actually can see the road forward and I believe that I could do this. You show them and you outline that for them. Again, this past winter, now we're up around 40, I think, new clients of people that have come in who I've never seen before that are now engaging in programs this winter. So it's been pretty good. I mean, conclusion, I would say define your goals, right? Figure out what you want to do. In my case, I found out that coaching was the answer for me. That's what I wanted to do, and I chased that down. I built the progress and created the programs necessary really to do that. But more than everything, I give people a reason to come see me. And that's what I want to do as a coach. I want people to come see me. I want people to look to me for the knowledge. I want to help people. That's the debt that I feel that I need to pay from my years of the coaching experience and all the things that I got to experience playing college hockey and doing all these amazing things. It was all a result of all the hard work that my coaches put into their craft and the ability to train me. So that's really the debt that I look to pay back. So thank you all for coming today. Questions? Yes?
Did you pay your dad back?
I did pay my dad back. I paid my dad back in the first 2 months. So that was an amazing, to be able to do that was pretty amazing. So, yes. So, any other questions, you guys? Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys being here. Yeah. All right. Thanks.